due to its effect on the paper as it condensed. Mistaking smoke for a kind of steam, they began filling their balloons with hot smoky air, which they called electric smoke. Despite not fully understanding the principles at work, they made some successful launches, and in December 1782 flew a 20 m3, 710 cubic feet, balloon to a height of 300 m, 980 feet. The French Académie des Sciences soon invited them to Paris to give a demonstration. Meanwhile, the discovery of hydrogen led Joseph Black to propose its use as a lifting gas in about 1780, though practical demonstration awaited a gas-tight balloon material. On hearing of the Montgolfier brothers' invitation, the French Academy member Jacques Charles offered a similar demonstration of a hydrogen balloon, and this was accepted. Charles and two craftsmen, the Robert brothers, developed a gas-tight material of rubberized silk and set to work. First public hot air balloon demonstration by the Montgolfier brothers, 4 June 1783 was a watershed year for ballooning. Between the 4th of June and 1 December 5 separate French balloons achieved important aviation firsts. 4 June, the Montgolfier brothers' unmanned hot air balloon lifted a sheep, a duck and a chicken in a basket hanging beneath at Annonay. The 27th of August, Professor Jacques Charles and the Robert brothers flew an unmanned hydrogen balloon. The hydrogen gas was generated by chemical reaction during the filling process. The 19th of October, the Montgolfiers launched the first manned flight, 8th balloon with humans on board, at the Folies Teton in Paris. The aviators were the scientist Jean-François Pilote de Rosier, the manufacture manager Jean-Baptiste Réveillon, and Giraud de Villette. The 21st of November, the Montgolfiers launched the first free-flight balloon with human passengers. King Louis XVI had originally decreed that condemned criminals would be the first pilots, but Rosier, along with the Marquis François d'Orléans, successfully petitioned for the honor. They drifted 8 kilometers, 5.0 mi, in a balloon powered by a wood fire. 9 kilometers, 5.6 mi, covered in 25 minutes. The 1st of December, Jacques Charles and Nicolas Louis Robert launched a manned hydrogen balloon from the Jardin des Tuileries in Paris. They ascended to a height of about 1,800 feet, 550 m, and landed at sunset in Nesles-la-Vallée after a flight of 2 hours and 5 minutes covering 22 miles, 35 kilometers. After Robert alighted, Charles decided to ascend alone. This time, he ascended rapidly to an altitude of about 3,000 meters, 9,800 feet, where he saw the sun again but also suffered extreme pain in his ears. The Montgolfier designs had several shortcomings, not least the need for dry weather and a tendency for sparks from the fire to set light to the paper balloon. The manned design had a gallery around the base of the balloon rather than the hanging basket of the first, unmanned design, which brought the paper closer to the fire. On their free flight, de Rosier and d'Orléans took buckets of water and sponges to douse these fires as they arose. On the other hand, the manned design of Charles was essentially modern. 40. As a result of these exploits, the hot air balloon became known as the Montgolfier type and the gas balloon the Charlier. The next balloon of Charles and the Robert brothers was a Charlier that followed Jean-Baptiste Masnier's proposals for an elongated dirigible balloon, and was notable for having an outer envelope with the gas contained in a second, in a balnet. On the 19th of September, 1784, it completed the first flight of over 100 kilometers, 62 mi, between Paris and Bavray, despite the man-powered propulsive devices proving useless. In January the next year, Jean-Pierre Blanchard and John Jeffreys crossed the English Channel from Dover to the Bois de Felmarès in a Charlier. But a similar attempt the other way ended in tragedy. To try to provide both endurance and controllability, de Rozier developed a balloon with both hot air and hydrogen gas bags, a design which was soon named after him as the Rozier. His idea was to use the hydrogen section for constant lift and to navigate vertically by heating and allowing to cool the hot air section, in order to catch the most favorable wind at whatever altitude it was blowing. The balloon envelope was made of gold beater's skin. Shortly after the flight began, de Rozier was seen to be venting hydrogen when it was ignited by a spark and the balloon went up in flames, killing those on board. The source of the spark is not known, but suggestions include static electricity or the brazier for the hot air section. 41. Ballooning quickly became a major rage in Europe in the late 18th century, providing the first detail-age understanding of the relationship between altitude and the atmosphere. By the early 1900s, ballooning was a popular sport in Britain. These privately owned balloons usually used coal gas as the lifting gas. This has about half the lifting power of hydrogen, so the balloons had to be larger. However, coal gas was far more readily available, and the local gas works sometimes provided a special lightweight formula for balloon ingevents. 42. Tethered balloons were used during the American Civil War by the Union Army Balloon Corps. In 1863, the young Ferdinand von Zeppelin, who was acting as a military observer with the Union Army of the Potomac, first flew as a balloon passenger in a balloon that had been in service with the Union Army. 43. Later that century, the British Army would make use of observation balloons during the Boer War. 44. Dirigibles or airships. The dirigible balloon created by Giffard in 1852 worked on developing a dirigible, steerable balloon, nowadays called an airship, continued sporadically throughout the 19th century. The first sustained powered, controlled flight in history is believed to have taken place on the 24th of September, 1852 when Henry Giffard flew about 17 miles, 27 kilometers, in France from Paris to Trappes with the Giffard dirigible. 45. A non-rigid airship filled with hydrogen and powered by a 3-horsepower, 2.2 kilowatts, steam engine driving a 3-bladed propeller. In 1863, Solomon Andrews flew his Aeron design, an unpowered, controllable dirigible in Perth Amboy, New Jersey. He flew a later design in 1866 around New York City and as far as Oyster Bay, New York. His technique of gliding under gravity works by changing the lift to provide propulsive force as the airship alternately rises and sinks, and so does not need a power plant. A further advance was made on the 9th of August, 1884, when the first fully controllable free flight was made by Charles Renaud and Arthur Constantin Krebs in a French Army electric-powered airship, La France. The 170-foot, 52 m, long, 66,000 cubic foot, 1,900 cubic meters, airship covered 8 kilometers, 5 mi, in 23 minutes with the aid of an 8.5 horsepower, 6.3 kilowatts, electric motor, returning to its starting point. This was the first flight over a closed circuit. 46. The 1884 La France, first fully controllable airship. Langley watches the flight of Santos Dumont No. 4. These aircraft were not practical. Besides being generally frail and short-lived, they were non-rigid or at best semi-rigid. Consequently, it was difficult to make them large enough to carry a commercial load. Count Ferdinand von Zeppelin realized that a rigid outer frame would allow a much bigger airship. He founded the Zeppelin firm whose rigid Luftwaffe Zeppelin 1, LZ1, first flew from the Bodensee on the Swiss border on the 2nd of July 1900. The flight lasted 18 minutes. The second and third flights, in October 1900 and on the 24th of October 1900 respectively, beat the 6M/S, 13 miles per hour, speed record of the French airship La France by 3M/S, 7 miles per hour. The Brazilian Alberto Santos Dumont became famous by designing, building, and flying dirigibles. He built and flew the first fully practical dirigible capable of routine, controlled flight. With his dirigible number 6 he won the Deutsche de l'Armée Prize on the 19th of October, 1901 with a flight that took off from St. Cloud, rounded the Eiffel Tower and returned to its starting point. 47. By this point, the airship had been established as the first practicable form of air travel. Heavier than air parachutes. The Vinsi's design for a pyramid-shaped parachute remained unpublished for centuries. The first published design was the Croatian Fausto Veranzio's Homo volans, Flying Man, which appeared in his book Machinae Novae, New Machines, in 1595. Based on a ship's sail, it comprised a square of material stretched across a square frame and retained by ropes. The parachutist was suspended by ropes from each of the four corners. 48. Louis Sebastian Lenormand is considered the first human to make a witnessed descent with a parachute. On the 26th of December, 1783, he jumped from the tower of the Montpellier Observatory in France, in front of a crowd that included Joseph Montgolfier, using a 14 feet, 4.3 m, parachute with a rigid wooden frame. Between 1853 and 1854, Louis Charles Leiter developed a parachute glider comprising an umbrella-like parachute with smaller, triangular wings and vertical tail beneath. Leiter died after it crashed in 1854. See kites. Kites are most notable in the recent history of aviation primarily for their man-carrying or man-lifting capabilities, although they have also been important in other areas such as meteorology. The Frenchman Gaston Biot developed a man-lifting kite in 1868. Later, in 1880, Biot demonstrated to the French Society for Aerial Navigation a kite based on an open-ended cone, similar to a windsock butte attached to a flat surface. The man-carrying kite was developed a stage further in 1894 by Captain Baden-Baden-Powell, brother of Lord Baden-Powell, who strung a chain of hexagonal kites on a single line. A significant development came in 1893 when the Australian Lawrence Hargrave invented the box kite, and some man-carrying experiments were carried out both in Australia and in the United States. 44. On 27 December 1905, Neil MacDiarmid was carried aloft in Baddeck, Nova Scotia, Canada by a large box kite named the Frost King, designed by Alexander Graham Bell. Balloons were by then in use for both meteorology and military observation. Balloons can only be used in light winds, while kites can only be used in stronger winds. The American Samuel Franklin Cody, working in England, realized that the two types of craft between them allowed operation over a wide range of weather conditions. He developed Hargrave's basic design, adding additional lifting surfaces to create powerful man-lifting systems using multiple kites on a single line. Cody made many demonstrations of his system and would later sell 4 of his war kite systems to the Royal Navy. His kites also found use in carrying meteorological instruments aloft, and he was made a Fellow of the Royal Meteorological Society. In 1905, Sapper Morton of the British Army's balloon section was lifted 2,600 feet, 790 m, by a kite at Aldershot under Cody's supervision. In 1906, Cody was appointed chief instructor in kiting at the Army School of Ballooning in Aldershot. He soon also joined the newly established Army Balloon Factory at Farnborough and continued developing his war kites for the British Army. In his own time, he developed a manned glider kite which was launched on a tether like a kite and then released to glide freely. In 1907, Cody next fitted an aircraft engine to a modified unmanned power kite, the precursor to his Latraplanes, and flew it inside the balloon shed, along a wire suspended from poles, before the Prince and Princess of Wales. The British Army officially adopted his war kites for their balloon companies in 1908. 44, 17th and 18th centuries. The Vincis realization that manpower alone was not sufficient for sustained flight was rediscovered independently in the 17th century by Giovanni Alfonso Borelli and Robert Hooke. Hooke realized that some form of engine would be necessary and in 1655 made a spring-powered ornithopter model which was apparently able to fly. Attempts to design or construct a true flying machine began, typically comprising a gondola with a supporting canopy and spring or man-powered flappers for propulsion. Among the first were Horch and Buratini, 1648. Others included de Gusmao's Passerola, 1709 on, Swedenborg, 1716, Des Forges, 1772, Bauer, 1764, Mir Wayne, 1781, and Blanchard, 1781, who would later have more success with balloons. Rotary-winged helicopters likewise appeared, notably from Lomonosov, 1754, and Porkton. A few model gliders flew successfully, although some claims are contested, but in any event no full-size craft succeeded. 49. Buratini's Dragon Volant, lit. Flying Dragon. Italian inventor, Tito Livio Buratini, invited by the Polish King Ladislaw IV to his court in Warsaw, built a model aircraft with Fauer fixed glider wings in 1647. 50. Described as 4 pairs of wings attached to an elaborate dragon, it was said to have successfully lifted a cat in 1648, but not Buratini himself. 51. He promised that only the most minor injuries would result from landing the craft. 52. His Dragon Volant is considered the most elaborate and sophisticated aeroplane to be built before the 19th century. 53. Bartolomeu de Gusmao's Passerola was a hollow, vaguely bird-shaped glider of similar concept but with 2 wings. In 1709, he presented a petition to King John V of Portugal, begging for support for his invention of an airship, in which he expressed the greatest confidence. The public test-off machine, which was set for the 24th of June, 1709, did not take place. According to contemporary reports, however, Gusmao appears to have made several less ambitious experiments with this machine, descending from eminences. It is certain that Gusmao was working on this principle at the public exhibition he gave before the court on the 8th of August, 1709, in the hall of the Casa da India in Lisbon, when he propelled a bolt-off roof by combustion. He also demonstrated a small airship model before the Portuguese court, but never succeeded with a full-scale model. Both understanding and a power source were still lacking. This was recognized by Emanuel Swedenborg in his sketch of a machine for flying in the air, 1716. His flying machine consisted of a light frame covered with strong canvas and provided with 2 large oars or wings moving on a horizontal axis arranged so that the upstroke met with no resistance while the downstroke provided lifting power. Swedenborg knew that the machine would not fly, but suggested it as a start and was confident that the problem would be solved. He wrote, "It seems easier to talk of such a machine than to put it into actuality, for it requires greater force and less weight than exists in a human body." The science of mechanics might perhaps suggest a means, namely, a strong spiral spring. If these advantages and requisites are observed, perhaps in time to come someone might know how better to utilize our sketch and cause some addition to be made so as to accomplish that which we can only suggest. The editor of the Royal Aeronautical Society Journal wrote in 1910 that Swedenborg's design was the first rational proposal for a flying machine of the aeroplanes, heavier than air, type 54. Meanwhile, rotorcraft were not wholly forgotten. In July 1754, Mikhail Lomonosov demonstrated a small coaxial twin-rotor system, powered by a spring, to the